A lot of people have the misconception that when you go to a psychiatrist, you will likely see this psychiatrist for about 50 minutes and receive therapy from the psychiatrist and perhaps medications as well. Well, that used to be the case, but it is no longer the case. In fact, in the past 10 or 20 years or so, the standard of care in psychiatry has been to use very short appointments known as med check appointments. These appointments last from around 5 minutes to 15 minutes. But I'm telling you, if you happen to get 15-minute appointments every time you see a psychiatrist, consider yourself one of the lucky ones, because most people just get appointments that last from 5 to 10 minutes, if that. Usually, the first appointment that you have with a psychiatrist will last from a half hour to 50 minutes, but all the appointments after that will just last from 5 to 15 minutes. During these 5 to 15-minute appointments, the shrink will not provide any therapy whatsoever. Instead, all the shrink will do is prescribe medications and try to get you out the door as quickly as possible. These types of appointments have become the standard of care in psychiatry, at least in the United States, but probably in a lot of other countries as well. It is true that it is still possible to find a psychiatrist that will do longer therapy appointments, but most of the time, psychiatrists don't do this, and most of the time, if you are going to a psychiatrist, you will just be getting the 5 to 15-minute appointments. Even the psychiatrists that do both of these types of appointments will usually do the vast majority of their appointments as 5 to 15-minute med check appointments. The reason why psychiatrists have made the 5 to 15-minute med check appointment the standard of care is because this way psychiatrists can make a lot more money. It used to be that a 50-minute appointment with a psychiatrist that included therapy would cost around $100 to $150. But nowadays, it's not uncommon to hear about med check appointments that cost $125. In fact, that's quite common. I've heard about med check appointments that cost over $200. So if a psychiatrist can charge pretty much the same amount for these 5 to 15-minute med check appointments and end up seeing 5 or 6 patients in an hour instead of seeing just one patient in an hour, a psychiatrist can make 5 or 6 times as much money doing med check appointments. Most psychiatrists have decided that the most important thing for them, their number one priority, is to make as much money as possible. Making money is more important than their patients' welfare, and so psychiatrists have prioritized making money. Now, in some cases, the patient may not be paying the full amount of the appointment because the patient might have insurance that will cover at least part of the costs. But the psychiatrist is still making the full amount of money, whether they get the money from the patient or from the insurance company or from both. Another reason that medication management appointments are so profitable for psychiatrists is insurance companies will usually pay more money for 3 15-minute medication management appointments than they would for just one 45-minute therapy and medication appointment. So psychiatrists can really maximize their income, especially if they take insurance, by having as many medication management appointments as possible. Also, psychiatrists have a lot less overhead expenses to pay for than the average doctor does. That's why whenever you go to a psychiatrist, you will almost never hear about a psychiatrist that even has a nurse, and you will almost never hear about a psychiatrist that has any medical equipment in their office. Sometimes psychiatrists will have receptionists or secretaries or people who do their billing, but they almost never have medical equipment or nurses. So they make a lot of money and they don't have that much expenses. So it's pretty profitable to be a psychiatrist. There is a such thing as a psychiatric nurse, but if someone tells you that they are a psychiatric nurse, that means that they most likely work in an inpatient psychiatric hospital. You almost never hear about a psychiatric nurse working for a psychiatrist outside of the hospital. A lot of times, psychiatrists will refer patients out to psychologists or social workers for therapy, but that means that the patient does have to pay even more money for a therapist in addition to all the money that the patient has to pay for the psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are making more and more money. According to Medscape, in 2018, psychiatrists had one of the biggest increases in compensation amongst all types of doctors. Medscape also quoted Tommy Bohannon of Merritt Hawkins, a physician recruiting firm, as saying that, quote, "We have never seen the demand for psychiatrists this high in our 30-year history." Demand for mental health services has exploded, while the number of psychiatrists has not kept pace. But another big reason that psychiatrists are now making so much more money than they used to is because of the medication management appointments, where they can make a lot more money doing those than they could make doing the less profitable, longer talk therapy and medication appointments. Perhaps financial incentive is what best explains why there are some psychiatrists that will acknowledge that 15-minute or less medication management appointments are a lot less than ideal, but that they do them anyway. Julie Fiedler on blogs.psychcentral.com wrote that when she first saw a psychiatrist, he told her that their first appointment would be 45 minutes and not a minute longer. In addition, he told her, quote, "I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, but don't go into detail because we don't have time for that. Going forward, you should know that all your future appointments will be exactly 15 minutes. I will not spend time with you or really even check to see how you are doing. I will check your medications and you will leave. I'm not saying it's right, it's actually very wrong, but that's how we do it." This move towards the 5 to 15-minute med check underscores the idea that psychiatry is really just about prescribing medications and nothing else. Psychiatry is not supposed to be solely about prescribing medications, and most psychiatrists will tell you it's not solely about prescribing medications, yet most psychiatric appointments are just these 5 to 15-minute med check appointments where the only thing they do is prescribe you medications. You might think that psychiatrists would be more likely to be the kind of people who are empathetic and who care about other people, and hopefully care about their patients and their patients' feelings, and of course their patients' mental health. But that doesn't always seem to be the case. A lot of people report that they don't really feel that their psychiatrist really cares much about them at all. And it is true that a lot of psychiatrists are actually people that don't really seem to have a lot of empathy, and primarily just see their patients as people whom they need to medicate and charge them money for doing so, and then get them out the door as quickly as possible. For that reason, a lot of patients really wouldn't trust their shrink to give them therapy anyway, and for that reason, a lot of patients are perfectly content to just see their shrink for 5 to 10 minutes, have their shrink prescribe them the medications that the shrink wants to prescribe, and get out of there as quickly as possible. The trouble is, this does mean that psychiatry is going to be more and more dependent upon the pharmaceutical companies. Psychiatry is already heavily dependent upon the pharmaceutical companies. When the pharmaceutical companies are the ones making the medications that you prescribe, you need the pharmaceutical companies to make these medications. And when the only thing you do is prescribe medications, then you are especially dependent upon the pharmaceutical companies. So these 5 to 15-minute med check appointments are increasing just how powerful the pharmaceutical companies already are over the field of psychiatry, and are making the pharmaceutical companies even more profitable than they already are. Psychiatric medications are extremely profitable. In 2013, Abilify, which is a psychiatric medication, it's also an antipsychotic, which is one of the most dangerous types of psychiatric medications, happened to be the most profitable medication of the year. That's partially because psychiatrists just love to prescribe antipsychotics for all sorts of things, even though antipsychotics like Abilify are actually extremely dangerous medications. That's why shrinks even like to prescribe things like Seroquel, another antipsychotic, and therefore a very dangerous medication, because all antipsychotics are very dangerous, for things like insomnia, even though they probably shouldn't, because Seroquel is too dangerous of a medication to be used for insomnia. But this does seem to be the future of psychiatry, and this future of psychiatry does help enrich psychiatrists and the pharmaceutical companies that make dangerous psychiatric medications like antipsychotics. On this channel, I do like to talk about mental health, and I like to give you a perspective about certain topics in mental health that you will often not find on other channels. So you may want to check out some of my other mental health videos as well. So if you like this video and you want videos that will give you more information about the mental health industry that you won't find elsewhere, be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel and click the bell icon for notifications. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat at ZorkMid123.